Hey, folks, as you listen in today, bear with us. Our guest, Tim, was on some Wi-Fi that gave us some trouble. We did our very best in editing like we always do, but you may hear some garbled bits, and one of them is even a joke. So stick with it all the way to the end, and you'll enjoy it. Hey, it's Nicole. Welcome back to the show. So excited to introduce our newest guest, Tim Parmeter. He's the founder and CEO of FranCoach, a company that helps clients discover whether or not franchise ownership is right for them. I've always wanted to know this myself. For me, I have so many questions already. This started as an idea at his kitchen table, and it's grown into so much more a decade later. He's partnered with over 600 of the top franchisors, and it spans about 70 different industries. Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you. Hey, just a reminder, our show is brought to you by SmartCookie Media, where we believe data tells a story, and not just any story, your business story. As a subscriber to the show or as a client, you'll get insights on profitable, data-driven marketing strategies that work for you and your business, your industry, not some cookie cutter trends. No. Ideas that are led by your customer data so you know they'll work for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram to learn more. Everything's in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. Tim, welcome to the show. Excited to have you.
Oh, no, thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome, Tim.
I'd like to start the show the way we do with every single guest. Tell me how you'd finish this sentence. You know you're an entrepreneur when?
You know you're an entrepreneur when you wake up and you know you have control over your entire day, right? You're not answering to other people, bosses. You're not in that horrible commute back and forth to work every day. It is truly the control of your life.
So Tim, tell us before we get too far, what is FranCoach? Both Matt and I've been wondering, is it something like you helped me create a franchise? Like maybe I want to have SmartCookie Media agencies all across the country. Wouldn't it be great if everyone had a SmartCookie near them? That'd be awesome. Or is it more so if I really want to own that Cold Stone Creamery? Of course, I'm dairy free now, so that dream is gone. And you'd help make sure that I have success with that.
Yeah, so it's the latter. So we're going to help people find the best franchise for them to own.
Awesome.
I love that.
So like a matchmaker.
We are, like eHarmony or Match.com for franchising, basically.
I love it. Very clear.
Because God knows that if you go to the franchisor and you meet their criteria, and most importantly, meet their financial criteria, 9 out of 10 are willing to take your money. Correct?
11 out of 10.
11 out of 10 are willing to take the money, right?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very definite kind of myth or misconception because there are so many of them in franchising. And we'll talk about trying to help people find the best franchise. But our first goal is really to just help people get properly educated on it to know if this is the right path. And the franchisor is going to vet you just as much as you're going to vet them. Like dating. Right? It's like, I can say, hey, you want to marry me all day long, but until you say yes, and then eventually I do, it's not happening. And really, when it's done properly, it should be the exact same process with the franchisor.
So Tim, we already heard about your kitchen table just a little bit. Would you tell me your story? What led you to entrepreneurship, this particular business? Was there a specific moment, event, or experience, maybe even as far back as a kiddo?
I grew up in the wonderful state of Indiana, and my dad was a basketball coach. And as you guys know, living there, like basketball's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Basketball and corn, I think, are kind of right there
We got
next to each other.
That's what we have.
Yeah.
So I was an athlete and went to college, played basketball. I coached after I got out of college. And so like in that world, you're kind of almost like an entrepreneur. It's why athletes make really good owners, right? There's all of those things that you're looking for, but I'd always kind of been in that position to create something myself. And then I had a stretch of working in corporate America and I hated it. One of the places I worked, I still know people that are just there. They're just like floating along doing the exact same thing that they did years ago. And while that's great for some people, I knew there had to be something more. Like I had the belief in myself of like, I'm going to figure this out. And I've got a thing still on my wall where I literally have the letters THTW in those early days and was like, this has to work.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners can relate, right? Like betting on myself is better than betting on something else that's led by other leadership that you have no control over. That's for sure. So Tim, because you support entrepreneurs, I bet you there's a lot you can tell us right there. I wanted to ask you for serial entrepreneurs or even just those that are considering it. A lot of our listeners are decision makers either at large companies, maybe they're in that situation that they're thinking that they want out, but also serial entrepreneurs that have more than one thing happening or more than one product line. But you get to see people repeatedly take new ideas and turn them into successful strategies. Is there an example or a story you want to share with them of a time of success you didn't see coming?
So I think one of the real intangibles with entrepreneurship and certainly as a franchise owner is you got to be able to like either follow the plan with the franchise, or if you're going to start something from scratch, you got to be comfortable being very uncomfortable. We use the letters FSO. So figure stuff out, though probably I'm going to use a different S word typically for that. One of the younger clients we worked with literally is 23 years old and didn't go to college. Right out of high school, he got a job kind of in the like oil gas industry. We started working with him like a year and a half earlier, and just financially wasn't quite where he needed to be. But like buying a house, get pre-approved, they're not going to tell you no. They're going to say not right now, and here's why. Right. And so with franchising and funding, it's the same thing. It's not a no. It's like, hey, here's the gaps. He did all these things to kind of get himself into a better financial position to now at 23 years old, start his franchise. And his first month of business literally had the most revenue that franchise has ever had anybody have in their first month. Month one isn't the end all be all. There's a long way to go, but to work that hard and have that kind of mindset of figure stuff out.
And what type of industry was that in? If he went from oil and gas?
A home service, they do coatings on floors, like garage.
Oh, epoxy.
commercial.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
One of the things in franchising that surprises people is the folks we work with when they start a franchise, it's rarely in an industry they have any experience in. And so like, how's that possible? Well, it's because you're not the doer. I always use the example of like, you could be the biggest slob on the planet and own a cleaning franchise because they don't need you to be the cleaner. They need you to run the overall business. So
Right.
it brings into play all of these potential options, which throws people off and goes back to that. How do we get people properly educated on what's out there and how to find it?
So that's interesting. You mentioned something in that story. I think it's important for our listeners to understand within FranCoach, it's not just the vetting and matchmaking and making sure that they're in position to go after maybe a specific type of franchise or to help them discover what would be a good fit for them, but also there's a funding component as well that you guys help with. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you can kind of equate it to buying a house. Like realtors aren't going to drive you all around town unless you have that kind of pre-approval. So in franchising, there are several different funding options. So we're going to look at somebody's overall kind of financial position, figure out which ones they're eligible for and kind of what that range is. So it's not just finding the right franchise. We also have to be able to afford it, have the funding options, be comfortable with all of that. Make sure we've got plenty of kind of planning financially for them to get started. So they are basically not being cheap when they get started, which is the flip side of the startup. Hey, we're on a shoestring, right? Well, franchises actually won't let you do that. They want you to be really overly capitalized. So you don't get cheap on marketing. You don't get cheap
want
on
the whole shoe.
on adapting, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're not funding, like you're not writing loans though. You're helping them just be prepared to get that
Yeah.
loan. Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and we work with groups out there that do nothing but funding options for franchising. So we're
Okay.
going to make sure we're getting them in the right spot to our best partner for them.
So some loans are 50K, some loans are 500K. What's the range?
Entry point is 100,000-ish as far as a loan. And I always tell people, like, if you could buy a house in the middle of Indiana, you got enough cash for the down payment, you have good enough credit to get a home loan. If we know those things, I know we will have hundreds of franchises that could be a potential fit for you, and we'll have funding options.
Matt,
So-
I've got ours. I bet you he might know one, but this should be our next business. We invest in together in this one. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
I think around here, there's like Great Illumination, someone who does all of the Christmas lighting.
Right.
Like, right. So like Christmas Vacation, right? Griswold
Right.
style.
Yeah.
But then also because you love Halloween. So like Halloween, Christmas, we just have to own that in terms of lighting. We don't have to worry about that through the holiday times. Let's do it.
3-4 months a year, work the hell out
3
of
4
the
months a
business.
year. Yep. And we're not doing it. We're not, I mean, I know how to, put up a ladder here and there. That's for sure. But it would take us out of the doing, right? Because sometimes
Right.
you and I, as an attorney and as a
Yeah.
marketer, we both get stuck in the doing. Instantly, Tim would just pick us right up and be like, no, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 months out of the year. And it's great.
So Tim, you brought up a really great point today. Maybe you're not great at building out systems and processes. Maybe you don't even have a clue on what software, what mechanical stuff you need to run a business. All you know is you just want to go own something, run it. There is definitely a benefit to just go do it and execute because they have the successfully proven model.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really figuring out, like, as an owner, what are you good at And don't tell me like, I've been in this industry, so I'm good at that industry. Like, what are you good at day in, day out? Are you great at sales? Do you hate sales? Are you good at marketing, networking? You want to have some pride of ownership in that, right? But then you realize like, oh, I'm smart. I can learn like how to waterproof a basement. I can learn how to make French fries. I'm not going to do either of those things all day long, but I understand the importance of it in the business model and I like what I'm going to do. And the franchise is providing basically step-by-step guidance
Mhm.
along the way. And one of the things that's key that most people don't think about is like buying power, right? So there's a huge home service group of franchises that I'll use as an example, like their fleet of vehicles for their owners. And I mean, they've got like 6,000 owners around the world with all their brands. They get the vehicle from the manufacturer cheaper than a dealership is going to because they buy in such humongous bulk. So now as an owner, you're getting things for less. It's going to increase your margins versus trying to figure out, you're in a sandwich shop. I got to get napkins. Where do I buy napkins? Or are these napkins any good? Is this a good price? Whereas the franchises are going to go, our vendor is Bob's Napkins, right? And he's given us a huge discount because of the volume. Just all those little kind of advantages along the way that help you succeed and kind of streamline that learning curve and that process that you don't have when you're starting from scratch.
Yeah,
So
it's a
here,
business in a box, an expensive box, but business in a
yeah.
box.
So here comes the lawyer question, Tim. And from time to time, if you listen to the show before, you'll know these come out. Is FranCoach, are you guys completely and wholly independent? Like, are you not incentivized by any specific franchise? Does that make sense
Is
what
there
I'm
an
saying?
affiliate link?
Yeah. Are you affiliated with specific franchises or is it truly independent consulting and advice to help that person discover what would be the right fit and going through that discovery process?
Yeah, great question. So for the clients that work with us, there's never any fee. We're kind of more like a recruiter. One of our clients starts a franchise, then the franchise compensates us for that because we basically finding them their next great owner. And it's basically always the same for all 600 plus franchises that we have a partnership with. So I don't care which franchise people start. It's not like, ooh, this one pays us $1 million and this one pays us $5. It's all really the same by design. So we are focused on the people we're working with. And again, frankly, not care which franchise it is. It's finding what's best for each person. Because even if we went through the process with each of you guys separately, I promise it would look totally different for Nicole versus Matt.
So now you just took me from like thinking matchmaker, you need a Tinder app for your business, really headhunter, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly what I was
you
thinking. I'm
are
sorry.
matching to success because this is a long-time partnership. That's really, really helpful for us to understand that. I mean, you really are doing the job that the franchisor should be doing, but maybe you're able to give different level of support. I would like to think it just seems that way already than what they can give. So what are some of the questions? What are some of those initial conversations? If Matt and I are like, listen, this is what we got going on, where would you take us to help us figure it out?
Yeah. So everybody's going to give me their spiel. This is what I've been doing. This is what I was thinking about. And I'll kind of like politely, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Not that I don't care. Right.
No,
But
well, this is why it's
No.
so fun for you to have you here because I always tell people I'm indifferent about the widget that I sell. And it's why I love marketing. Like right now, I'm about to talk with somebody that has a manufacturing business. I work with a lot of portrait photographers because I'm indifferent to the widget. I'm about profitability, right? I want to know how do we get there faster? So this way might be different you talking to serial entrepreneurs who have owned more than one thing.
Right.
yeah, the very first thing we really talk about is why are we even looking at this? What is it about owning a franchise that you think would make your life different? And I mean, if somebody can't answer that, we're probably done.
Level
But
of trust that people give to brands.
Yes.
There's my reason. My husband the other day was in the store shopping with me. He goes, hey, this one's Idaho potatoes and this one's Idaho potatoes, but it's 50 cents different. This is the financial analyst, folks, by the way. Sorry to throw you under the bus, babe. And he goes, yeah, but they're both Idaho potatoes. They have the state. Because I told him, just make sure they're Idaho. And I go, this one's Dole. He's like, okay. And I was like, oh, man. I was like, most people are going to go to Dole. I said, but yeah, you're going to grab those. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd
grab
grab the other ones in a
those.
heartbeat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Right.
I go, that's marketing. That 50 cents is going to their marketing campaigns. So to me, that's the reason, Tim. The reason for me is it hops you up that no like and trust factor. People just trust right away a name that they see. Two men in a truck. Nothing's fancy about their marketing, but people trust it.
Mhm.
So there's my reason.
Yeah. When you look at some of the questions, we're really going to focus on your day in a life. What are you actually good at? Right? What do you want to get up and go do every day? Things you're good at, things you enjoy, things you don't. We're going to kind of build out every business needs customers, which is a really fun fact that we might want to all write down. Every business should have customers. So how do we find them? Who finds them? Who sells to them? Why do they buy from us? For how long? What kind of staff do you want? Can you manage skilled labor? Can you manage people that are cutting your hair when you have no business ever doing that? Some people can, some people can't. What's our financial goals? How big do we want to grow this? Is one unit enough? Awesome. Do we want to own the whole state? Things that people don't ever think about. You're like, that's a business. People are going to buy from me. Those like intangible pieces are going to be what somebody's definite answer is or preference is. And sometimes it's just core values of you as a human and how that aligns with the franchise. Because this is a marriage. This is a long-term business partnership. You don't have to be besties, but you have to have a trust that these people know what the heck they're doing and that they're going to have your back and support you where you need it. We'll talk about industry, but industry is really the last and least important thing in building this out. It feels like it's the most, but it's not, because you're not going to be the doer all day, every day. You're the person running the business.
So let me ask you this then, because we have a lot of people who listen to this Serial Entrepreneur Show that still work in the corporate world. They're corporate decision makers. They're people who are still in day-to-day 9 to 5, so to speak. They come to you, Tim, and they say, I want to go start up a business. I don't even care what it is, but I want freedom. That's a word we hear almost all the time on this show. I want some time freedom. Someone else has owned my time. Is that a misnomer as a franchise owner that if I'm going to own a franchise that I get time freedom?
Oh, 100%. Control is the word basically everybody says that we talk to, right? Why are we looking at this? I want control over my life, freedom, flexibility, schedule. And you're asking a good question about like, what if I have a job? I may not love it, but they are still paying me, but I really got to figure out something else. So can you have a job and own a franchise? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. And so you'll hear in franchising that's referred to as a semi-absentee owner, which is the fancy way of saying you're part-time because you got something else going on. Not every franchise is open to semi-absentee owners. So,
Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A, like,
right.
they're not really into that. So,
And if we're being honest, they're not actually a franchise because you basically rent
yeah,
Yes.
Chick-fil-A.
understand.
You pay to be a manager, right? And this is the crazy thing is you'll have two franchises in the same industry. They look the exact same to the consumer. And one's going to say absolutely no to semi-absentee owners. The next one is going to say, yeah, we're good. We can get by with them doing 10, 12 hours a week. There could be a third franchise doing the same thing that's going to say, we're open to semi-absentee. We don't love it. Probably need them to spend 20 to 25 hours a week. None of that bits of information can you Google. Like Google is not your friend with franchising because it's just showing you consumer stuff. It's not showing you the proprietary stuff. So
I'd like to think Subway would be one of those semi-absentee. I never find an owner, and I usually can find an owner.
yeah. And that's one where typically they're going to own multiple of them.
Right. Yeah.
With that. So you're not going to see them very often in the store by design. But conversely, Jimmy John's is going to really want hand-owned owners. It doesn't mean one's better, worse, right, or wrong, but one's going to resonate with you more than the other one. This is such an individualized and personalized process. And you got to kind of tune out a lot of the noise because you're going to have somebody in your ear going, oh, what are you doing? And I think that's the same if you're doing a startup or a franchise, because they're probably just jealous that you've got the courage to do it.
And before you came on the show today, we had a brief discussion. You said, for instance, like great clips versus super cuts. Both are retail, both cutting hair. There are going to be dynamics to maybe great clips that you might like that you might not like with super cuts. Maybe one is open into a absentee owner, right? And one isn't, right? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it goes back to why one of the reasons the franchise people end up owning it, because it's going to be those intangible pieces along the way that are really going to get people ultimately pointed to where they need to be.
Sports clips, I'd buy into that one because boys' haircuts, believe it or not, they get a little pricey.
Yep. If there's a franchise out there where the haircut place comes to the daycare, like they do for nursing homes for old folks, by the way, they do
or dog grooming. Come on, Matt.
I'm serious. They're already in a captive audience, already contained.
Have you
there and
have you ever seen a bad haircut?
Yeah,
that's why. No, I'm gonna stand around my 3-year-old and I'm gonna hover. Yeah, definitely gonna hover.
Okay. All right. Good point.
Okay, but even retirees, I was just thinking that some retirees that are in the right position, this may be a good option for them as well. If there's a semi-absentee option, they don't all have to go be a Walmart greeter if they're bored. They could stay sharp if they, retired at somebody I'm thinking of. Yeah, 60-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about people that are in the workforce and imagine you're getting into your 60s. So I'm going to go into my boss and I'm going to say, look, I'm tired of working full time. I want to work about 10 hours a week. I'm going to come and go. I'm going to pick and choose when that is, but I want you to pay me the exact same. Like, how fast is your boss going to call security to escort your butt out of there? Right? As a franchise owner, maybe I'm working full time in my business, but I get to a point where I don't want to work full time. I can dial that back. I've got the people in place, right? The business is still rolling. It's still making money. At the end of the day, here's the other difference. When you leave that job, whether it's your choice or somebody else's, yes, they paid you the whole time, but when you leave that job, it's done. You don't get to sell it to the next person. You don't get the legacy it to your kid. When you're done with that franchise, that's something that you can sell and cash out, or you can pass it on to somebody in your family and let that be that kind of legacy builder for your family. You can't do that as an employee. Our parents lied to us, right? They said, go get a degree, son, go get a job and you'll retire and get your gold watch when you're 62. Well, it's a bunch of crap, right? Like, why in the heck would you do that when you could really have control? You've got to want the control. And in franchising, you got to be smart enough to follow a plan. That seems simple, but if you are the person you are convinced you are always the smartest person in the room, you're either in the wrong room or you're just wrong.
Ignorance is bliss. If you are highly intelligent, if you've built multiple successful companies, like from the ground up, not using a franchise model, it's almost more difficult, I would think, to go into a traditional franchise model where someone is saying to you, yeah, but you're going to use this because it's better or you get better pricing or whatever. And you're going, yeah, but is it? If you're the person that's always going to question that, man, it's almost like I said, ignorance is bliss a little bit for going into some of this.
Yeah. The first question we ask people is, why are they looking at this? And if you're coming to me and, yeah, I own this business and that business, like, well, just because you owned it doesn't mean it went well. But people ready for that transition are going to say, I don't want to have to figure every last thing out. Just give me the proven plan and let me take off and run with it. And then I'm usually going to go, are you sure? Are you going to follow the plan? Sometimes people just really have no business owning a franchise because they need their own thing or they need a job, and that's great.
What is the length of time most people stick with the franchise that they choose? Are they in a 3-year? Are they in a 5-year? What are they in?
So most agreements are 10, but that doesn't mean you're stuck there or can only be there 10 years. The end goal is you're always going to sell it. So is that in a year? Is that in 25 years? That part's up to you. The average, all this from the Federal Trade Commission not too long ago, about 90% of franchises are still open after 5 years. So
Okay.
even the ones that aren't doesn't necessarily mean they failed. We had a client a few years ago, literally he passed away, sadly, after about 2 years, and his wife didn't want the business anymore, right? So they just closed.
So do you have a light illuminator partner that Matt and I can buy in?
Yes.
Please tell me it's on your list.
Several.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Several. See, Matt?
There you go.
Yes.
Good.
There we go.
Yeah,
There we
nice.
go.
Yeah.
And then anytime we get really tired of people being people. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
If you were to own a franchise, have you looked at a few that you're like, might be that one, might be that one?
I've owned a couple.
Yeah. Have you?
Oh.
You have?
And in fact, my wife and I had 2. We sold both of them earlier this year. So this is the first time in, I don't know, probably 7 years, we've not owned a franchise. And we've basically told ourselves we're not allowed to own anymore for a certain time because she's really growing all her stuff. And we've really expanded FranCoach over the years. So trying to keep her focus there, but there will be another one in the future for sure.
What is one of the number one things every business needs? What would you say? What's like the thing that
Sales, customers. Come on.
sales,
Yeah.
customers,
Yeah.
customers? Yeah. I've heard it said as a starving crowd, right? Like we need somebody who's like just begging for this product to be out there. Is there something that you're seeing taking off in franchising that either is a surprise or you're just like, this is the up and comer? Because I think like a lot about senior care. Like in my family, we call my in-laws the rents, so the parents, and then there's my mom, my dad, and then my stepmom. And then we have 2 little boys. So we literally have more grown-up adults who are going to be aging and then only 2 little guys. So I think a lot about, what our seniors are going to need. There's how many billions of boomers. And so I think a lot about that. But any other starving crowds we should know about?
Yeah, it's like 10,000 people a day turn 65, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a booming, no pun intended, industry, right?
Yeah.
And something you can make a huge difference. You can make a lot of money. But again, it's all about that fit. And so there's the staples that are never going away. Like think of all like the home service that we're always going to eat, right? Those things are always going to be there. Then there are newer things. A lot of things in the health and wellness space are emerging. We just had a client recently do a franchise that does infrared sauna. And so there's the IV drips, there's cryo, there's a lot of things from that standpoint that are new, they're trendy. You mentioned the Christmas lights earlier. 3 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. Now there are really 5 different franchises that we work with that one does nothing but that. And there are some others that have that as a line item. And
Yes,
so
right.
there's always those new things that are popping up as well. Like we're going to come up with one that does haircuts at daycares now for Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Tim, I do have one question. I know for a fact by being in commercial real estate and have worked with when franchises explore our areas, looking for spots and looking for demographics and whatnot. One of the interesting things I have found, even when you're talking about national chains, big corporations, when they look to go place, I have found it very interesting that certain marketplaces, even though we know people were willing to drive 25 minutes to the county, so to speak, and that a specific area might generate a lot of business in that one specific city because you're grabbing from multiple other cities. Are franchises as strict as corporations with respect to demographics and retail type of locations? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's a good question because it's a place people can get caught in the weeds when we
Right.
are looking at a franchise. But the thing I always point out to people, the mapping software franchises use, it is creepy how much information that they have. Like, oh, look, Tim's wearing a blue shirt today. It is crazy and how like granular they can get. We mentioned senior care. So
Mm.
they may look at a territory of say 20,000 seniors. Well, okay, well, that's one thing. I've seen the software where they can basically do like a heat map of a particular zip code, where in that zip code the seniors are. We had somebody in the most random rural place you've ever heard of, Soldotna, Alaska, years ago, owns a senior care franchise. Now he has half of the state of Alaska, but you're used to windshield time. If you're going to live in the middle of nowhere, you use windshield time. So they're going to be able to analyze every inch of the country. It's their job to make sure you're successful, to understand the demographics and what that franchise needs for it. And then we're going to help people get comfortable with that data to know, oh, okay, well, I feel like there's a lot of competition, but when I really look at the numbers, I need like half of 1% of the overall pie to grow a big business. Like, okay, I can fall out of bed and get 0.5%, right? Or you'll get caught up in competition. Well, what's across the street from Walgreens? The
CVS.
CVS.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Wendy's follows McDonald's wherever they go. Right.
Right.
So car dealerships all together. So sometimes competition is actually beneficial to you because it shows the market demand.
One of my friends they develop large medical facilities, and the mapping software that's available to them, it's actually really scary, not just creepy, but like scary that they're able to show pockets, particularly our area, on the high levels of stroke over the next couple decades that will be here. And sure enough, what went up recently? A stroke center. What went up somewhere else? Yeah, another stroke center. It's pretty amazing what's possible when we study humans. So what is one of the key lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur? Maybe it's a mantra you find yourself saying again and again.
I think it's things that we're already talking about,
All
and
garbled.
it's
Let's
not
try that
me.
again.
Like
All
there's
garbled.
Sorry.
I think it's which is funny.
put it in the
Yeah, we should keep that in there. Yeah, I think it's
that's probably the most accurate thing I've said. So
yes.
Nicole, ask me that again.
What is one of the key lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur?
This has to work and you gotta figure stuff out, especially when it's your own thing. The buck stops with you.
Tim, how would you define your entrepreneurial success?
In progress, if you know the reference from the movie or better the book, Moneyball, I'm kind of a Moneyball person, right? What are the market inefficiencies? How can we increase? How can we do better? So I'm super pleased and super happy of what the business has turned into, the team we've grown, but that's what we've done. Now what's next? So it's always in progress.
I love that. So tell us, what's a link for you? I know what you're going to tell us, but I also know that you have a podcast too, that you're a host. Is there a link that you want to send folks to? We can get to know you better or connect with you directly.
So yeah, thank you. Our website is francoach.net. Our podcast is called Franchising 101. Podcast website is franchising101.net. And I always tell people I'm a basketball guy, so everything for me is nothing but net. So everything for us is .net. Yeah, we've been doing the podcast for a little over 3 years now.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Super fun.
Yeah, congratulations. Are you doing
Thank
that
you.
weekly? How often do you have a show?
We do it every week.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge you. We do too. We just hit 2 years in. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to tell us more about?
That's the last question I ask everybody on our podcast. And I always kind of chuckle when it catches them off guard. And then that just caught me off guard. So,
You should have known it was coming, Tim. Come on.
so
No. Sorry.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah. So I've been just setting the stage for that the whole time. I think the biggest thing is if you're listening to a podcast like yours that has the word entrepreneur in it, or you listen to one that has franchising in it, you've thought about this. There's some level of curiosity. I always just tell people, like, what are you waiting for? Like for us, reach out, schedule a call. There's no fee for our service. First conversations are like 15 minutes. So it's kind of like Geico, right? Like you can't take 15 minutes to learn if there's a way out there for you to take control of your life. Maybe there's not, but I mean, you're going to waste 15 minutes scrolling through social media today. Why not spend 15 minutes to kind of help create your better tomorrow?
Thank you so much, Tim.
This was so fun. So thank you.
Hey, it's Nicole, and that's the end of the interview. But stick around. This is the part where Matt and I break it all down and give you our favorite takeaways. Listen in.
Matt, we just got done chatting with Tim, and I think we've got two things on our mind to talk about. You go first.
Yes. How much are you in for the franchise? 75 grand, 100. I mean, what do you got?
Let's do it. 100K. Let's bring it.
Okay. Sounds good. So that
we
maybe
got
it's three
like
things.
in the next 18 months. Let's do it. Let's
Okay.
figure
Sounds
it out.
good. Yeah. All right. So there's three things. We got that first one out of the way. But secondly, the big thing that was a takeaway for me was we talked to so many entrepreneurs, people who are really creative and had to start the business from start to finish, do everything. FSO, as he called it, figure stuff out, but not really stuff, right? And it's interesting because although some of us entrepreneurs maybe lean towards non-franchise type ownership, where we might think, oh, well, we can do it better, or we have better ideas, or we just want to do it ourselves.
Cheaper. Let's be real. We think we can do it cheaper. So we're just going to do it cheaper, but it's heck, man, it's hard.
He blew my mind away when he said, according to the FTC, 90% of these big national franchises are still around and operating after 5 years.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there as an entrepreneur going, how could I have an insurance policy? No, this is going to work, right? Yeah. This has to happen, right? Is what he was saying. This has to work, right? If you're thinking about that, you can have a built-in insurance policy by just buying into a national franchise. They are incentivized. They are invested in ensuring you're going to work. Don't forget.
Yeah.
And that is something that kind of changed my dynamic today. It was an aha moment for me that I never thought about it like that. It's an insurance policy to say, hey, you know what? This business is going to work. How about you, Nicole?
Illumination.
Yes.
N&M.
Yep.
We're going to come up with a better name. Working title.
Yeah.
No, so powerful, so true. I'm a person who loves ambiguity, loves creating something out of nothing and, finding a way to systematize really anything. Today on a team call, my team, that I hire around me, they're very detail oriented so that I can stay in visionary mode as often as possible. And she was just like, I can't just quite see it all together. If I could just see it all together. And I said, I got you. I'll show it to you. And then you and detail can run with it. And that's just it. I believe even though I could do that, it'd be really nice to walk into like a done for me. Here's the POP, promotional merchandise plan, the map like we used to have in Blockbuster. Like, here, just do these things and it's going to be fire. I mean, here's the French fries to get people in the door. I mean, that sounds just a smidgen easier, which I think is what you're trying to say, the insurance policy.
Yep.
Number 3, do you want to know what I learned today?
What'd you learn today, Nicole?
Options. There are so many options, not just that he works with 600, not just that there's 70 industries, although, I appreciate a data point as well, but so many options, whether it is part-time or that fancy word of semi-absentee owner, whether maybe that's why I don't see the Subway owners, whether it is no need for retail space, whether it is vehicles at a deep discount, it sounds like, or even the lending funding options that are available. I just figured I always had to sit on a pile of, cash, 300, 500K before this would open a door for me. And to hear that there are so many options, what a benefit it is to have somebody like Tim, who you don't have to pay. And you can also listen to his podcast for free to really explore that. And like you said, basically learn into your curiosity. I thought that was wild.
Yeah, it was crazy for me to think about like, oh, well, if you could buy a starter home. So I'm starting to think to myself, even if it's 20% down, I mean, that's not a lot of money. Well, I guess it depends what the starter home's at. But anyways, if you could buy a starter home, your credit's good enough for that, and you have a little bit of cash set aside, you could participate in one of these 600 franchises. It's sounding really good right now. I don't know about you.
It is.
It sounded really good.
Sounded pretty great. Oh, yeah. They're going to mail me my monthly plan. Like I'm telling you, I think it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, friends, you know what we always say, if you're listening,
keep listening.
You've been listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Show, produced by the team here at SmartCookie Media.